We've been seeing at Twitter that they're announcing now, making public that they are going to have an official supported Pages API for creating and modifying pages, officially supported. Of course, the PNP has had support for creating and modifying pages for quite some time, but this will be an official versus a reverse engineered version of the API. So.
All right, welcome everybody. It's going to be a speed round today. We got 30 minutes to cover at least 2 days full of announcements from Ignite. We'll focus on our favorite things, on a few areas of particular interest to Synpraxis. So welcome to the recap. You know the team by now, by and large. We're going to focus on these 3 areas. We're going to focus on administrative areas of Microsoft 365. We're going to focus on internet and employee experience, and then all the dev things, which we're calling customization, integration, and extension. Let's dive right in. Oh, we got builds. All right, administrative stuff. Todd, gonna be like, ready, camera 2, go camera 2. Okay, Todd, you're up.
Unmuted. Okay. So there was a ton of great things. And like Mike said, it's kind of a speed round. He's got the Oscar music to play me off, ready to go. There was a lot of security things, a lot of admin-y stuff. If you do a Control F in the book of news and look for SharePoint, there's not a lot there, but there's a lot of, foundational things there. But a couple that I wanted to call out for the SharePoint folks is they announced conditional access policies for SharePoint. So conditional access has been in Azure for a while, but it's the ability to craft a access policy that says, Mike can get into this SharePoint library unless he's coming from, Massachusetts, or unless he's on his Android phone or something. So you can kind of cater those. Those have been in Azure for a while. They're going to now have that for SharePoint. Another thing that they've added is a malware scan. And so now if Office 365 detects that a file is infected, it's not going to let you open it. It's going to make you download it. So hopefully your local antivirus can do stuff with it. Another thing that they've added is to keep you admins in line. There is better auditing for admin actions and things that have happened to a site, changes, things like that. That's only, like all the other stuff, that's only going to be around for 30 days. So you're going to want to pull that into something else if you want to keep good tabs on that. And this one just kind of got thrown into my bucket. There are a bunch of really bad renaming decisions, in my opinion, but and I don't know if anybody else is going to cover it, but Microsoft has said they're going to drop the Office moniker completely. And so part of that is the Office 365 app can't be called that anymore because they can't use the word Office. It's now verboten. So the Office 365 app is going to be called the Microsoft 365 app. And so that's all over. As far as any of us can tell, it's exactly the same app. It's just they've changed the name and the icon.
All the Microsoft branding elves were dormant, so they needed to do something.
Yeah. Next slide, please. Or can I do that?
You didn't see him playing on his phone?
Oh. Right. He was trying to get in. I got him locked out.
Yeah, exactly.
And this was one, like I had to double check this one. So Tenant Rename has been available in some fashion since the Carter administration, but they announced at Ignite that it is officially out for tenants that have fewer than 10,000 users, I think, or 10,000 sites or something. But this is the ability to rename the blah.sharepoint.com part, or blah.onmicrosoft.com. We've had a few customers who've used it in the last couple of years when it was in different previews, and it works pretty well. It does what it says it does. It's got a bunch of little places where you can snag your sweater as you're going through. So make sure and read up on it, or reach out to us. But if you do need to rename your tenant, that's there. The final thing that I will say is we've got the book of news link all over. Read those things. There's a bunch of just Azure-wide stuff about authentication and things like that that are really exciting for us admin folks. I'm done. Ding, take it away.
Thank you, Todd.
You don't have to play the video. I just put it in there so we can have it as a resource later.
I was like, what's happening? Okay.
You sound so nice.
All right, Mark, you want to talk? I think, Mark, you had video on the stream?
Yeah. So the transition from Stream Classic to Stream on SharePoint has been going on for a while. Some of us have been using it for a while, but now it's actually generally available for everyone. If you're a video-oriented organization and you're still putting your videos into Stream Classic, you probably shouldn't be. You should be just putting them into SharePoint document libraries in the context of where they belong. So if a marketing site, marketing team has a site, that's where their videos should go. If the corporate communications team wants to promote some videos on the intranet, then they should be in the corporate communications site. It actually was going to give you a lot more options on how you can share and use videos than we had with Stream Classic. The video of Mark Mraz and some other guy talking about all of this, they're so animated and they're so excited. I'm just trying to get some of that across. Okay, I can't do that. If you're in Stream Classic, there is a migration tool that will help you get out of Stream Classic and into Stream on SharePoint. That is in public preview, and I believe that most people can get access to it now, right? Public preview, that means it's there. That's supposed to go GA probably around the beginning of the year, I'm guessing. That's a guess. That's not an actual date. And at that point, once that migration tool goes GA, then there will be 1 year to migrate your videos across. So this isn't something you can just ignore. You can search for videos just like any other content. They're really first-class citizens at this point. I think it's, you know, it's ready for prime time, and you'll find that video treatment in SharePoint is just as good as in Stream Classic. All of the features and functionality is pretty much on parity. So I will stop now because we've got lots to cover.
All right. I think we've taken on the effort of trying to summarize all of the Syntex announcements in one slide. And the next slide's even worse. We tried to summarize all the Viva announcements in one slide, which if you attended the conference or saw the agenda, you'd know is a fool's errand, but not the lowest. So the three big things here I put in red, the things that really jumped out at me. The bulk translation of documents. Have talked to folks working in multilingual environments before. That's not a trivial task. We've tried to do that bespoke with Azure Cognitive Services, and the fact that it's baked into this for some organizations could make it worth the $5 a month of incremental cost by itself. Microsoft announced also e-signature in the form of first-party native Syntex e-signature capabilities, in addition to having connectors for third-party e-signature capabilities like DocuSign, et cetera. And Syntex Protector, I think, touches a little bit on some of what Todd talked about in terms of security and governance around AI-powered oversharing insights. So we jokingly talked about Microsoft saying, share all the things, and then now we have actual reports that will show us where content has been shared perhaps too broadly, perhaps the content owner has gone away in some sort of untimely way, et cetera. So like there are new AI-powered out-of-the-box capabilities for to provide insight into that. There's a lot of other things in here and a ton of Syntex stuff, way more than we can cover in this half hour, but I've dropped a lot of resources into the resources slide for you to dig deeper on. And if any of you are coming to Collab Days 365 New England on Saturday, Chris Bortlick will be presenting Syntex, some of the what's new with Syntex as well.
There's a bunch of this oversharing stuff sprinkled through different parts of what they talked about at Ignite, and I think it's sort of almost bordering on hysterical, because they have been trying to get us to share everything to everyone at all times, and now we're oversharing.
Yeah, I skipped one. I didn't share it with you all in the SharePoint bit, but they added a thing for that too, where you can essentially kill sharing, except for people who've been explicitly given access to things in the SharePoint site. Like I had to bounce it off of these files. I'm like, do I understand what's going on? Sharing without sharing.
All those ad hoc sharing link kind of shares, right, can get cleaned up in one swell foop, if you will.
Yep.
Okay. We also I think of real interest forward looking is content assembly. So the ability to create a template for, say, a statement of work, document type, and then pick elements of that, the scope section, the terms and conditions section, the payment section, the hours estimate, et cetera. The ability to kind of dynamically assemble content out of little granules is going to be very interesting to keep looking at. Let's jump to Viva. So way too long. So Emily, do you want to start on Viva, and I'll touch on my topics?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you may have noticed, the Viva suite is growing, and the list of additional modules seems like every single day we get a new one. And in Ignite, they tried to group them into these 4 different quadrants, which I think is really helpful in us understanding what do we actually want to use these for. So they talk about the idea of connection, purpose, insight, and growth. So next to each, I'll just kind of start with the connection section of some really high level takeaways that we have. So there is a new home experience coming to Viva Connections in March 2023. So Viva Connections is going to serve as our home for all the different Viva modules in Teams. Is this a replace for an intranet? We don't know yet, but I'm sure we'll have some robust ask and praxis conversations about that as we get closer to that release and know more about it. For Engage, they talked about Leadership Corner being added and Storyline. Now, for those who are a little bit further behind, Engage is a rebranding of the Yammer Communities app in Teams. And one thing that I really liked that came out about Engage and Topics is this idea that they're taking that question and answer that used to be in Yammer, and they're making sure that it's integrated across Engage and Topics, which I think will be really powerful. And then back in September 22nd, they also announced more details about Amplify, which is your ability to create communication campaigns across a bunch of different channels. Now I'm going to drop down to the left to Insight. So not a lot on Viva Insights releases. They just echoed those praise enhancements that are available now. They did announce Pulse, which is another tool that has smart templates, research-backed questions, and analytics. It's listed as coming soon, and unfortunately, it's not in the M365 roadmap. For all of the Viva announcements, I checked the M365 roadmap, and unfortunately, they all said coming soon on their slides, and none of them are in the roadmap. So we don't really have clear details on what is coming when, except for that new home experience in Connections. I'll pause there and pass it over to you, Mike, for purpose to talk about goals and sales.
Sure. In Viva Goals, I think the most interesting thing I saw was all the third-party integrations. So if you're building your goals in Viva Goals and you're building your OKRs there, the ability to surface them in places like Slack, Jira, Google Sheets, I think was very interesting in their near-term roadmap. It's kind of like, hey, let's meet people where they work, right? This underlies all of this stuff. Sales is very similar. Sales, the Viva sales capabilities around AI guided conversation intelligence. Basically, what the hell does that mean? It means if you're working in teams, you can work with teams connected with your CRM system, whether that's Dynamics or Salesforce or something else, and get some intelligence to the next logical purchase, the next logical step in the conversation, et cetera. Prompts for professional sellers via the integration of Teams and CRM. So Topics is continuing to mature as a product. We're seeing new connectors all the time. I think the entrance of Topics into the Outlook desktop application is a crucial inflection point for Topics being more relevant and more present for more users. So I think bringing it to where people work. So between Teams, Connections, and Outlook, we're hitting the major work surfaces for Topics. They've taken on translations into Spanish, French, and German in this wave, and answers allow for Q&A across both Viva Engage and Viva Topics. So surfacing topics within Engage, etc. Emily, back to you, because I think learning is near and dear to your heart.
It is, and I'm regretting my slide order a little bit, so we're going to go into the feature comparison later, but for me, this was a game changer that they announced the ability to have learning paths. So essentially right now in Viva Learning, any of your content that you add, it's all peers, there's no connection. So if I have a piece of a business process that belongs to different departments and I want to stitch them together in one clear narrative of the process you should follow without having to know who does what in the organization, that doesn't really exist. So I've been historically a huge advocate of learning pathways instead to meet that need. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a couple slides on the feature comparison chart between Viva Learning and Learning Pathways.
It's a hell of a segue.
So on our next slide, this is just a little peek at that Viva Connections home that they're talking about. So you can see across the bottom, we have the bottom of the banner, our entry point to some of the different modules. So again, that is coming in March 2023. So we will see how that's going to change how we think about our intranet and how we connect things into Teams.
And I wanted to include this because I think a lot of times we've talked about all these new capabilities and wanted to know where there's incremental licensing required for it. So the left-hand column are the things included in your enterprise license. You can buy a la carte for some of the Viva Learning capabilities. There's also a suite, $9 per user per month using an annual subscription that includes everything except sales. Viva Sales is pretty expensive. I think it's $40 per user per month. It's very cheap in relation to Dynamics CRM or Salesforce, but expensive relative to the other components.
All right. Yeah. So should have been a little earlier. Thanks for your patience on us getting back to this one. So you'll see in those two new columns under Viva Learning and Viva Learning Paid, I have listed out coming soon. So this idea that we can have learning paths, I'm hoping means you can also stitch together that Microsoft content that's brought into Viva Learning. As of today, you can only do that in Learning Pathways. The big update that I really want to see in Viva Learning, where I still feel like Learning Pathways outshines it, is the ability to surface learning content in SharePoint. You can see that's our bottom row. So the ability to have your training content in context of where people are getting their work done really is the best way to support someone learning something new. Asking them to leave where they're working, go to another location and find that training content and return to back where they're working is just too much of a gulf for most people, and you'll get lost and distracted on your journey there. So still hoping to see some in-context learning capabilities from Viva Learning in the future, but nothing was announced.
All right, let's talk devy things with, for team dev. Oh, sorry, Emily, the builds.
No worries.
The builds, the swell, and the dissolve. Okay, customization, integration, and extension. What did we learn?
We learned lots. No, you know, similar to the SharePoint thing that Todd mentioned, there wasn't a whole lot of dev specific things in this announcement. But one of the things that they announced at Build and then reiterated here at Ignite was the updated Teams SDK toolkit for doing development inside of Teams apps. There was a version 1, it's been out for a while. There've been sort of various stops and starts on providing a new update to it, but this was actually a really consolidated update, rework of the SDK. And some of the highlights are, it gave us the ability to, instead of just doing Teams extensions, we can build extensions in Teams and Outlook and the Office web apps. And I think that's, I have the little star there because it supports Teams in both the desktop and the web clients, but then in Outlook and Office, it only supports the web client right now in targeted release, and they're working on in beta on the desktops. It also changes the way we do deep linking in and out of the apps. So you can use, you know, an adaptive card extension or a web part, and you can direct users directly into a Teams app. And they changed the way we did that. And they added link unfurling to Outlook. So when you get the little preview pane from your customization, you can get that link unfurling inside of Outlook as well. Next. The other thing, and if you're interested in Teams development, there's also an update to the Teams Toolkit, which was obviously updated to include the Teams SDK. It is, it's for Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code. So depending on what it is that you're trying to build, whether it's a messaging extension or a web part or a team tab, you get various templates and helps you deploy with multiple environments. So you can have a dev, prod, you know, testing, release. And it really does help jumpstart your application development in Teams. And if you're interested in that, I looked this morning, a friend of Simpraxis, Bob German, he works at Microsoft, and one of his jobs is he pulled together this app camp that is actually happening tomorrow to get more information on how to jumpstart Teams development in your organization. So if you're dev focused and you want to join that, the link is in the bottom of the page.
APIs.
Yes, so in reference to the chat conversation that's going around on APIs, we are finally seeing the planner APIs, which existed but only were available through delegated permissions, which means that any API call that you would make had to be executed in the context of a user and couldn't be executed as an application. So if you wanted to do something like provisioning, where you created a planner plan and you set up the tasks for the plan, et cetera, and you wanted to do that as sort of an application context, like as part of provisioning or part of some other solution that you built, that wasn't possible. You had to have a user that had access to the team that the plan belonged to do that work. And that was a very limiting aspect of actually using Planner in more custom built solutions, business solutions using the suite. So the thing that they're announcing this, but it's really an announcement of an announcement. So essentially, they're saying watch for around late November when they will announce when the APIs will be available with application permissions. So very meta, yes, very recursion-esque, as Mike just said in the chat. So, that will be coming though. And so we can only be happy that it is making itself to the light of day. There is sort of a tangential announcement that we didn't put on the slides, but we've been seeing in Twitter that they're announcing now, making public that they are going to have an official supported Pages API for creating and modifying pages, officially supported. Of course, the PNP has had support for creating and modifying pages for quite some time, but this will be an official versus a reverse engineered version of the API. So we're all in the world of development, we're all very excited about that being the case.
Yeah,
So
Julie, I think not an Ignite announcement, just something that we saw kind of leak out on Twitter over the last few days, right?
Yeah, it's just talking about the fact that they're going to have some previews of that again towards November. They're going to start having some more information about that coming, but knowing it's coming is half the battle.
Supported Pages API. Who would have thunk it?
Yeah,
right.
It only took 5 years. It's fine.
All right. Fair point, Kayla. So they did announce next year, if you're as in-person events become a thing again, as they become a thing for folks, this should be a good one. I think we'll be there. I'd expect that we'd be there in force. So it's next November 15th and 16th, and a lot of resources. We don't know where there is, do we?
Is though. Yeah, you can't say we're going to be there because we don't know where there
They
is.
said when, but not where.
Well, we're going to go to there though.
I believe it's going to be a hybrid event again, though. That's what I saw. So what they did this year is they had people in person, but it was a lot. There was all online.
Microsoft is now in love with hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
It actually is more inclusive, so there's some positivity.
It is,
to it.
yeah.
Yeah, well, they have a quarter million. Yeah, 250,000 people attended. I think.
Yeah.
I'm just
so to Emily's point,
Iowa will host it.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah.
Ames,
Iowa, known for its
Yep.
To Emily's point, it is very considerate of them to announce it ahead of time versus the 6 weeks we got for this one. So.
All right. Resources. Anything we want to underscore here? Obviously, the Syntex stuff. There's an awful lot in there about it.
Sue's roadmap slides.
Oh yeah, great point. Right. You want to talk about those?
Yeah, I mean, Sue Hanley does like the brunt of the work, and she collects all of the roadmap slides from all of the Ignite sessions and posts them up on a PowerPoint, so you can go check them out. You can see everything that folks are promising, and then you can have receipts when they don't deliver, or if they deliver early.
Or you can make it a game. Or you can make it a betting situation.
I'll take the over.
Yeah.
I bet the over.
Whack a promise, we call it.
Yeah.
Also, the Book of News, I think the way they've laid it out, it's a super useful resource. Like, it's always been good, but just the table of contents in there, the ability to search within there, just to kind of jump to the stuff that is most relevant to you. That's an awesome asset and an awesome resource.
Yeah, and that last link at the bottom, like, read that thing start to finish. There's just a bunch of stuff. It's tough to pull out the stuff that's important to SharePoint and all that, but there is just authentication and security, and it's all good stuff.
Yep. So I'd like to, since we're fortunate to have other MVPs as guests, I'd like to ask them, like Rob in particular, what resonated with you from from Ignite. Clearly, you're paying attention to this stuff. You want to come off mute?
Yeah. So funnily enough, I wasn't, because I
Really?
was at a conference last week. So I was otherwise occupied. I'm trying to catch up on some stuff. So I've watched probably like 5 or 6 sessions of the recorded stuff. Nothing really jumped out. The Pages API stuff, I thought that was announced, but I guess anyway, I found out about it last week, so I was excited about that. But yeah, I unfortunately I haven't had a chance to really dive into the Ignite stuff yet.
I figured you were kind of co-igniting in Branson, right?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I watched the Caruana session with Jeff Teeper and Caruana.
Right.
And I watched the keynote, but that was really all I watched while I was actually in Branson.
So there was Ignite, and then you and Branson were lit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lovely.
It took a minute, but yeah, I see what you did there. Yeah.
Thank you for coming. Awesome. Okay.
I will say one thing that is tough about Ignite is it's during the work week. We all have our jobs. So of course there's conflicts and it's a huge volume of content. What I tend to do is look at the book of news and the roadmap slides first to narrow down where I want to look into further announcements. And my hack is to go to the sessions and download the slides, because they have their recorded demos in the slides. And most of the time, I don't personally care about their 15-minute marketing pitch around why they're making these changes. I want to see what's changing in the tech. So you can just skip ahead in the slides and then watch those recorded demos right there. And it just seriously cuts down on the amount of hours you have to invest in finding out about what's going on.
That's an amazing tip.
Yeah,
That's a great tip. Yeah, one of my biggest problems is I can't sit and watch a video of all that stuff, and I can watch it fast and it still doesn't work for me. So reading the slides is actually better. I learn more reading the slides than I do watching the videos.
To that point, if anybody wants to throw into the chat, if there is a link that we would send people to who didn't register for Ignite, where they can get this content, I think that would be super useful for our guests today. 3 minutes left. Gonna actually look forward to 2 weeks from now. We're trying to take a more solution-oriented focus, like not talk about products, talk about solutions. So whenever people leave organizations, they leave ownership of sites and content behind. They may be instrumental in Power Automate flows under their account, et cetera. So like there's a lot of considerations with employee offboarding. How do we ensure that knowledge and important system information don't leave the organization when a person decides to leave? So that's 2 weeks out on November 2nd. Obviously this Saturday, a big deal for us, biggest in-person Microsoft 365 event, in a community-based event in New England this year. So Collab Days New England at the Burlington MTC. If you're not planning on attending, we'd encourage you. I think, Julie, there are still registration spots still open.
Absolutely. Yep.
I think that if you don't register ahead of time, Julie won't even let you have a carrot stick for lunch.
one carrot
firm but fair.
No carrot stick for you.
Firm but fair. Thank you, Todd Clint, for supporting me.
Rules are, they're important.
All right. So that's Saturday's event. It's linked here in the deck. We can post a link in the chat for folks who need to know more information about that. If you haven't heard us talk about it ad nauseum, Saturday's the big day. And as always, Julie, any new content from you and AC on Cloud Dev Clarity?
Yes. Yesterday night we dropped the discussion about our commentary on React hooks versus React component development. So using one of those two technologies, the great debate on that. And so that episode just dropped yesterday for anyone who's interested.
Sweet. If that's it, I know we're at the top of the hour. We accomplished our objective of all that you could possibly absorb in 30 minutes. There's a lot more depth in that resources slide. Feel free to dig in. Feel free to keep the chat going in chat, or hit us up if you've got specific questions about other things that you didn't hear today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Appreciate your coming. Hope to see a bunch of you Saturday.
Thank you so much for joining us this week on Ask Praxis. We love getting your questions or session ideas. you can submit by using the link in About. If you find this helpful, hit that like or subscribe button and share this content with your colleagues. Join us again as we release new content every other Wednesday.